Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, where we talk about complex metaphysical supernatural subjects. Sure to ruffle a few feathers tonight, as one of our great patrons, contributors, Bentley, has asked me to comment on this Michael Tim article called Profiling the Atheist. And that's from November 2018. And so in this article, by the way, the great Michael Tim, the Michael Tim blog, which is a huge compendium of research related to the subject of an afterlife, Tim is basically profiling what is it that makes the kind of pseudo-skeptic, hardcore materialist atheist tick, and how do you deal with these people, and what is the profile of this psychological archetype. And maybe this is a good way to learn about, when we have friends and family members who dismiss all of our experiences, who insist that nothing could possibly be real of any kind of spiritual, non-material nature. And, how this can be a huge pain in the butt for people like us, people like myself, who are involved in these subjects. Even if we just have an interest, it's like you become a witch, burned a heretic if you show any interest in these topics. And so it is a big problem, but specifically the patron is wanting me to comment a little bit on Michael Tim's opinions of an non-anthropomorphic God and some concerns that she's had about this perspective. So I'm going to touch on that. So before we continue, if you like these kinds of subjects, please go down, hit that subscribe button, share the video, hit like, hit notification bell. All of that helps to keep this operation going, as well as if you want to head over to the patreon.com/afterlife topics, throw a couple dollars in if you like this video, buy me a cup of coffee. Really need it to be able to keep going with all this work, because it's a lot to manage between this page, the website, the Facebook community, and articles and books, and so I can't do it without your support. So back to the subject, and let's see. So Michael Tim, basically, he spent, as he points out, close to 80 years having met many people who call themselves atheists. And a little bit about Tim. He's a former athlete of renown as a runner, and he is pushing 80, I believe. But super active guy on his blog. I've actually been interviewed on his blog before. He has so much experience in these kind of supernatural areas, and he's a bit frustrated by the kind of self-righteous attitudes of people who call themselves atheists in the atheist community. And so he's come up with these, how many is it? 21 different sort of profile characteristics of the hardcore, closed-minded materialist atheist. And we'll go over some of those in a moment. But I want to focus a little bit in on his what Tim has to say about the anthropomorphic God. So where are we? And what Tim does, Tim points out that by the standards of most religions, he says that he would be considered an atheist. And this is the ironic thing, is that you could be an atheist and be interested in subjects like an afterlife, and then be branded a heretic by members of, I guess, the organized atheist communities. And Tim points out that he doubts the existence of an anthropomorphic or human-like God, even though he calls himself an Orthodox Christian and sees Jesus as being a chairman of the board, or at least one of the directors, on the other side, assuming it is possible to give terrestrial names and imagery to celestial beings and matters. And hey, maybe it is possible. I'm surprised at sometimes how terrestrial certain elements of that side can be, with hierarchies and organization and things of that nature, but that's a different whole subject. But what does Tim mean when he talks about the anthropomorphic God? This is something that my patron wanted me to narrow in on, because she's a bit concerned about, when we talk about a non-anthropomorphic God, are we going back into that direction again of dogs barking and interrupting my video? Anyway, are we going back in that direction again of basically entities existing on that side who are of a celestial nature, who are not anthropomorphic, who are not human-like, who are lacking human characteristics? I would say that this is not. I don't think that necessarily relates to this argument, because when we talk about an anthropomorphic God versus a non-anthropomorphic God, what we're talking about is the idea of God being. If you've ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you'll see God appearing on screen with the little with the little mouth that moves up and down, saying "I am God," and it looks like that famous painting with that was a Da Vinci painting, wasn't it? Or God, I'm messing up my classics history lessons, but you know what I'm talking about. So the anthropomorphic God has long white hair, big and muscular, and striking blue eyes. He comes out of a cloud, and is like the male hierarchical figure of the hierarchy of heaven, who is the CEO of the cosmos, and everybody has to appease this entity all the time that some would call Yahweh. And this is the conception of God as still conceived by particularly conservative religious groups. The non-anthropomorphic God is that God is source consciousness, celestial consciousness that exists all around us and permeates reality, exists everywhere, and you can't classify it as any kind of singular entity. It's that all of us, we all came from the same mind that has its origin point in the highest, most kind of celestial level, which we could call God, which is you almost say it's a collective intelligence of all life forms, all souls, and making up all of reality. And so if you pray to God, you're praying to the cosmos, you're praying to existence itself, the personification of life itself, not some dude with a big white beard. So that is kind of what we talk about, the anthropomorphic versus the non-anthropomorphic God. Now, I think you might also be concerned about, okay, so we're talking about, Jesus as a celestial entity, but could Jesus be a human, or are we again going into like people are non-physical on the other side, floating around as pure energy and not having human characteristics? Well, the people who report the afterlife, who report the other side, people even like Jürgen really points out the nature of higher celestial entities who, there is people don't lose their humanity. The human form, the human shape is itself kind of a beautiful cosmic archetype, and it into the uppermost spectrums, into quote higher levels, you don't not see humans. What you see is extremely beautiful, perfected human shapes, and we see this a little bit where maybe with certain people in this world who are really, really beautiful. Trying to think of a couple of names, maybe like Eva Green, or who else do I have a crush on? I don't know. There was quite a few very, very beautiful women. Maybe even Gal Gadot, the chick who played Wonder Woman. There's some really beautiful people here in this world, but still we're all subject to entropy. But sometimes I think when we see beauty, we feel connected in the sense that this is like the idealism of what the human specimen should look like. And in higher planes, that becomes more and more the standard as we move toward a more perfected state. And so certainly higher celestial entities fall into that category. So it doesn't have anything to do with if there were some kind of a hierarchy of celestial beings, it doesn't mean that they're all formless orbs of light, like to bring up the old cliche. It just means that there are more deified and perfected versions of the human race that we know about. So hopefully that covers what you're asking about. So now let's jump down a little bit into what Tim talks about with the atheist archetype. I believe in science is often the smug reply by the atheist To which I respond that I also believe in science. If the person pursues the science road, I sometimes stress that I am familiar with the scientific method and probably have more experience. And then he cites, of course, his background in insurance as an insurance adjuster, having taken on tens of thousands of claims requiring scientific protocols. And that there's other types of science besides just laboratory science, including courtroom science. Courtroom science is more applicable to psychic phenomena than is laboratory science, although some laboratory science is applicable. But if you want the big picture about the afterlife, then we have to use courtroom science a bit more to be able to use solid testimonials and solid personal experiences, seeking out those experiences and chronicling accounts, chronicling people's eyewitness testimonials, and different elements of courtroom testimony. We can start to piece together what the laboratory experiments are able to just to hint at. So this is how you get the big picture. And so very much this channel is about courtroom evidence. To move along, he says, if the atheist does show some interest, which is rare, I try to get across the point that the afterlife I have come to accept is not the humdrum heaven and horrific HELL of orthodox religion, but involves a much more active lifestyle than that espoused by any church. But it has been my experience that most atheists are stuck in the muck and mire of scientific fundamentalism and will have none of it, just as much as evangelicals are stuck in religious fundamentalism. And over the years, he says he's developed a profile of the hardcore atheist. They may not have all these characteristics, but there's 21 common ones. Number 1, was likely brought up in a religious family, quite often in an evangelical family. This is common. It seems to be common that people go to extreme contrasts when they are coping with something, especially if it was abusive in any way. Had problems with parental authority when young and was often rebellious. Yeah, the rebellious soul, and hey, God bless, no pun intended, the rebellious soul, because they get a lot done. While in school, adopted science teachers and professors as substitute parental figures, and quickly divorced religion in favor of the intellectual reductionist approach of the teacher or the professor. Isn't that true? I'm lucky that I've had some smart teachers in my day who aren't like pure reductionists, but I've seen the pure reductionists, and it's such a hollow philosophy to look at reality only in this way. Cannot now believe anything that can't be replicated and validated by science, believes that it is necessary to prove the existence of God before considering the evidence for an afterlife, as if these two things are connected. Tim is reminding us that these two subjects are not connected, and as an astral explorer myself, I've spent many times appearing in other realms that we could describe as the afterlife, and I've met such a variety of people that there's atheists on the other side. So chew on that one. Believes war, famine, poverty, premature DEATH, etc. are evidence that there is no God, as a benevolent God would not permit such things. So no God, no afterlife. And it's such a silly idea, because if there were a God, why would God be this, daddy figure, keeping us out of trouble and stopping bad things from happening to us, when it seems like the whole idea of Earth is a testing ground? That doesn't make any sense. 7. Had an inferiority complex most of his or her life, but now sees his intellectual atheism grounded in science as making him or her better and smarter than all of his or her friends who still suffer from religious superstition. So yeah, the intellectual superiority, and it's really hollow with these guys too, because if feeling superior over other people, spoiler alert, doesn't actually make you feel very happy. In fact, it's a hollow, fleeting sense of accomplishment. Number 8, has never really studied the evidence for the survival of consciousness, but finds it convenient to parrot people like James the Amazing Randi and Michael Shermer by saying it is all fraudulent. And these guys made a career on basically just attacking a segment of the population who have had spiritual experiences because another segment gets to laugh and snicker at them. So they've had careers in being divisive. And we see this in politics. We see this in many other areas where you divide people against each other, then profit. And that's what I see with these people. Is Randy still alive, by the way? He must be approaching like 100 years old by now. Number 9, assumes that celestial ways and means must meet terrestrial standards, thereby assuming that science has it all figured out. You see this all the time when people are saying, well, there could never be an afterlife because we know according to science that what is it? There's only 4 dimensions, and how could something exist that we couldn't see physically with our own eyes? Or what are some other ridiculous arguments? We know there can be no afterlife because if the brain is no longer functioning, how could you generate consciousness someplace else? It's like, hello, this is the whole idea. The whole idea is that it's being produced someplace else, not in your brain anymore. Hello, McFly, to paraphrase Back to the Future. 10. Attempts to put on a courageous front in his or her belief that life is nothing more than a march into an abyss of nothingness, but is really shaking in his or her boots, especially as they enter old age, when the courage turns to bitterness and despair. So the pretend courage is really bravado. So this is a big one as well. There can be a lot of kind of pretend. There can be a lot of kind of fake bravery to pretend that somebody to pretend that they are more tough-minded than somebody else, to be able to accept the harder reality of life, while realizing that what they're really condoning is a very grim existence. 11. Doesn't fully grasp the difference between evidence and proof. And that's a big one as well. Thinks that, how do I elaborate on that? So, that they'll say that there never has been evidence of a supernatural occurrence in history, but they don't actually know what standards constitute evidence. And in reality, there's more evidence for these topics than probably some of the most established scientific principles. It's just that it's not accepted. 12. Assumes that the afterlife is nothing more than angels floating around in clouds and strumming harps for eternity. Hate to say it, if you ask certain people in the New Age field, that is also what they think. And it doesn't help anything when you have people claiming that the other side is pure positivity. We're all instantaneously angels. We all serve God forever. Because then the opposition uses that to paint a picture. And it's also nonsense. 13. Fails to recognize that the evidence coming to us through psychical research and parapsychology is not always consistent with religious dogma and doctrine. 14. Thinks that television ghost hunting programs are what psychical research and parapsychology are all about. Don't get me wrong though, I love ghost hunting, and we can actually learn stuff through going to locations that to find connections with other dimensions. And some areas are like the other side is bleeding in. And you can go there and you can contact the other side, and that's pretty awesome. But it's not the ghost hunting shows. That's not where you get objective knowledge. It's funny when somebody hangs out in one of the groups, and their only awareness of any of these topics is from watching Ghost Adventures, and then they think that we become ghouls and phantasms when we cross over. 15. Kill a mosquito. 15. Accepts the debunker's explanation that all psychic phenomena are the result of fraud, hallucination, or self-delusion. The only self-delusion happening here are the people who make this claim. 16. Believes everything he/she reads concerning paranormal phenomena at Wikipedia is the straight scoop. There is a concerted effort of people trying to keep the status quo intact who operate Wikipedia. Hand me a tinfoil hat, but it is a concerted effort, and Wikipedia fools people on many levels, and there's a reason why you'll get an F in a proper university class if you cite Wikipedia for anything. Even if it's something that's proper, like who would make up a fact about the Roman ruins in Lebanon where I was, you know. I mean, but still, because it's Wikipedia, even something that is, you know, very unlikely to be tampered, you'll still get an F if you cite Wikipedia, and that dates back to when I was in university about 65 years ago when I was in school, and you know, back then Wikipedia was kind of a new thing. And still back then you'd get an F because professors knew how biased it was. And today even more so. So now Wikipedia is supposed to be how we learn about this subject. 17, almost done. Assumes that psychics, if real, should be able to pick winning lottery numbers, be totally correct in everything they say. You'd think maybe there's some would be winning the lottery. And how do we know that they're not? How do we know? Because they wouldn't reveal it if they did win the lottery this way, would they? Right? So maybe it's, for all we know, Michael, this has happened. How do we know it's not happened? 18. Stresses the misses in the testing of psychic phenomena while ignoring the hits, even though they are far beyond chance. This is almost like fanatically obsessive and just bizarre when they do this. You know, it's, I mean, you can do this for anything. You can find like 56% of dogs have fleas, right? And then arguing that all dogs have fleas. You know, it's this really weird thing that they do where they find what's convenient to them and they prop that up and they ignore the hits, they ignore the counterpoints. 19. Assumes that if spirit exists, they should be all-powerful and able to effectively communicate all the time, always. Unfortunately, some people in the New Age community also believe this and feeds into this misconception. 20. Says that we should live for today and not concern ourselves with what happens after death. I hear people say this. Most people think like this. I'm here to bust that paradigm down. I'm here to say we should concern ourselves with what happens when we try not to use words that YouTube doesn't like. When we cross over, right? Okay, live for today, live in the moment. Eckhart Tolle believes in living for the moment, but that also means living in the moment on the other side. It means this as a lifestyle. It doesn't mean ignoring the existence of things coming at us, because we're all on the train tracks. The train is coming for all of us. You're on the train tracks. I'm on the train tracks. It's coming. Even if we don't see it, it's coming for us. Why not think about it? 21. Fancies him or herself as a self-appointed guardian of truth in the war on superstition. Man, just go to reddit.com. You know, check out the guys on Reddit. There was an article recently saying basically that all people who believe in anything that is of a supernatural nature basically is suffering from a brain disorder, and that got like 25,000 upvotes immediately on Reddit by the holy righteous crusade of those fighting the war on superstition. And underneath all of that facade, in my mind, is a lot of insecure people, scared of reality, scared that some of this stuff is real, and it's going to make life a lot more complicated. And also, what will happen to your sense of intellectual superiority if it turns out all this stuff is real? Well, guess what? The curtain's being peeled away, and the archetype of the closed-minded, hardcore materialist atheist, they don't have much time left, in my opinion. There'll always be people clinging to this, but the winds are not blowing in their favor. All right. So anyway, this is Cyrus, Afterlife Topics. Thanks for watching this video. Get involved with the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, or check out some of my books like Understanding Life After DEATH, or The Afterlife and Beyond, on Amazon, on Kindle. You can also order them at Barnes & Noble. You can join the community about this subject as well as discussing the books. You can get involved with the website. All this stuff keeps the information coming in. Appreciate your support. I'll have to catch you guys on the next video. This is Cyrus. Talk to you soon.